Okay, cool. So what's going on, guys? For those of you who you've never been here before, that's perfectly fine. Like I was saying, we're kind of, I guess, we're pretty early point, so we can start kind of reviewing things. Does everybody go ahead and have like Xcode open who has a Mac?
Cool. So what's going on,
Cool.
guys?
If you do,
For those
oops,
of
I'm
you
gonna mute this. Okay. So if you can't see, or you're somewhere with a Mac, or if like if you want to come move over here or something like that, there's a few open spots. But if you can't see, or you just want to access this little live stream, if you just go to youtube.com/c/Mobi UTA/live, which I'm gonna put on Facebook, you'll be able to access everything and even like post in a little chat. Um, if you have any questions, you can like message on the live stream or just raise your hand and I'll stop. Like anything whatsoever, just raise your hand and I got you.
Cameron.
What's up?
Put the URL on my phone.
Yeah, no, I'm putting it in the Mobi Facebook as soon as it decides to load. Running Xcode and a live stream at the same time kills your computer. Jeez. I almost forgot to submit the link with it. There we go. Publish. Cool, if you want to access the link, just go to our Facebook. Make sure to like us. We don't have that many likes. Alright, so to get everything kind of started, there's two ways, I guess, you can go about, starting with this so far. Number one is, like someone was saying, just go ahead and make, an Xcode application for the first time ever, which we talked about last time. Or you can do what's called cloning this one, and I'll go through that for a second. So we've done, several changes since the last meeting. One of which is this UTA live stream. So if you're at home and you don't feel like coming, we enforce it. Like we ask that you just show up or whatever. But if you can't make it, you can always watch the live stream, stuff like that. So YouTube actually saves a lot of those live streams, and so you can go back and watch later. And what's up?
You have friend requests.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Who is this? I don't know that person. Oh, yes, I do. Okay. I have a lot of friend requests. Like I didn't answer. I don't really like. So one of them, I'm not gonna name who. I don't really like.
Hey, that's me.
Really? Oh, it's that one. I'm just kidding. There's one of them in particular I don't really like, and the rest of them I just don't know them, so I just kind of keep them there. I don't want to like deny them, but it's like if you act like you haven't seen it, that's my thing on it. I also have a message. What is that? Cool. All right. So anyways, so we have a live stream now, so you can go ahead and access it whenever you want. And so today, me and Nat completely 100% finished up the UTA login. So what essentially happens is there's a lot to build, honestly. We used to use this thing called Parse, which is why we don't have it anymore. Parse has died. It was an easy way for you to bring data to your app. You didn't have to set up a server, nothing like that. Well, Facebook decided they wanted to, venture into ads instead of Parse, and so they killed off Parse. It's open source, but it's like you might as well use something else, right? So we made it something ourselves, like completely from scratch. And so you're able to like log in, view your account details, all that kind of stuff. Me and Nat today we're working on resetting your passwords. So essentially how it works is whenever you sign up with us and we enter your name in a little Google Drive, which won't exist for much longer, you get added to a database, and then you'll get an email to reset your password, and you can go ahead and log on and stuff like that. Once again, Nat literally just finished it, and so we're going to add all like CSV of everybody who's paid, and then you'll get the email sometime tonight. You can go and log in. And then another thing is, I don't record these anymore. We actually make these videos outside of being in Mobi, like so you're not getting like all these random questions or random commentary. It's like one-on-one, kind of like someone at the computer is walking through step by step. You can go backwards, stuff like that. So look forward to that. There's also a lot more videos. There's like three videos by itself just in Swift, like covering just Swift concepts. So cool stuff there. All right, so lastly, we have github.com/idappthat. You can kind of see it up at the top here. We've talked about this quite a bit, but this is our GitHub page. This is how we essentially add code together, make things together, stuff like that. Here, that portal that I was talking about, like where you can sign on and stuff, if you're interested in React at all, it's completely open source. So you can go and contribute to it. You can add stuff. I mean, all of our API is public on here, so I mean, go ahead and penetration test it if you want, but it probably won't break because we're using like JWT and stuff. But anyways, we have this folder here called Mav Swipes, and this is the app we're working on. We're working on a Tinder, right? So this is the coolest part. For those of you who don't like watching videos or aren't a member, everyone has access to these guides. And these guides go step by step on every single thing we did. For instance, here is literally everything about that first meeting if you missed it. Introduction to iOS. This talks about Swift, what Xcode is, everything like that. Next, you have Introduction to Xcode, which is how we went through and created a project. A lot of guys had questions about this, so I drew some ugly lines and made sure we were aware. And then how to start and stop your device, stuff like that. I'm not going to go within it too much, but essentially the whole idea is when you're at the Learn meetings, we're giving a more detailed of what we did on this guide, essentially. And this is your reference. You can go back if like, hey, he's talking too fast or something like that, right? Or if you missed the meeting, stuff like that. So we actually have the project here. You can essentially what's called cloning it and access it from the device itself. So to do that, there's two ways. If you're familiar with Git, go ahead and clone it. But if not, you can literally press this green button right here, and there's a download zip file. I mean, honestly, this is by far the easiest way, and you can open it. But in my case, I'm going to show you the complicated way. If you miss this, that's okay. It's not too big of a deal. We're not making a video just on this, so but it's called Git. So I have this command line, right, and I'm going to make it gigantic like Nat's terminal. And so I can do things like ls, right? I can list all my applications. So literally, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say git space, just like the website. I'm going to say clone, as in like cloning something, shallow copy, whatever. And then I'm going to paste it. For those of you Windows users who can't Control V in terminal, I'm sorry. You right click and press paste.
Everyone is fixing
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, I didn't realize that. So you press enter and it'll clone, right? And then you can open that directory. So I'm going to go ahead and clone this to my desktop. I don't want to clone it to my normal thing, I guess. So CD, I'm going to go to desktop. I'm going to git clone this project. It cloned it very fast. And so I'm going to go ahead and open up on my desktop. I'm going to go here. And I'm going also a lot slower for those of you who aren't familiar with Macs. So you click this little finder thing down here, and this is your file system. It's like explorer.exe. So I have Mav Swipes right here, and inside of that I have this this file. This is your normal Xcode project. This is essentially your main.java or whatever you would use to open your editor. This is the way that iOS knows, like, hey, here's where my storyboards are, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up there. Like I said, you can start over if you want. It's completely up to you. So to start off, I'm going to change it. I want my simulator to be a 7 because the 7 plus is gigantic, and you can't really control that on the computers here. But one thing is, when you run as a simulator, some of you, it may pop up some error saying like you need permissions. Let us know if that happens, and we'll be able to type in our password, and it should work. So anyways, Mav Swipes is ready to go. I have my directories over here. Let me open this up. So as we talked about before, you have this main.storyboard. You have a app delegate and a view controller. So let's go ahead and pretty much kind of redo what we did last time, just a lot slower pace, and let's do it right? So last time, we really got into what this little panel is here to the right. And for those of you who haven't played around too much in Xcode yet, this is where I can go and drag in all my widgets, all that kind of stuff. I can add buttons, anything you want in general, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start things off by adding an image. I'm just going to drag it straight in here, and I drop it. Super simple. Like I said, you can just search for it. You can do whatever. But right down here, you have image view, and I drag it in. And one thing some people might notice is if I drag some component in general and I keep it out on the side, it's not going to go through. You have to make sure it actually lights up. You see how I did there? As soon as it lights up, you're free to drag it. Bam, good to go. So at this point now, I can kind of zoom in a little bit. I can see this panel that I have now. I have this image right here. I have a label, and I'm ready to make this whole Mav Swipes application. So And just like before, I'm just gonna just center this a little bit, and then let's go ahead and let it run, see how things go. But while that's running, I guess I can explain a few more things about the Xcode storyboard. So last time we kind of talked about these properties over here, and this general area in general is where I can edit anything that I'm selected. So if I'm selecting the entire view controller, I can edit things like the background. I can make it purple, dank, right? I can change the tint color, all that kind of stuff. I'm gonna go back. And then to the right here, I didn't really talk about this last time, but this is what's called your hierarchy of general the items in general, right? If I have a image view, if I have a label, if I have anything in general, I can see it here, and if I can't find it, I can click here and it'll be there, right? So Simulator finally decided to open up, and this is what I get. And so you're like, what the heck? Where's the image view, right? Well, if you don't actually have an image, the background is transparent, so it doesn't show anything. So that's where we'll actually go in and we'll set our image. How do I run it? Okay, so I can do two things. I can hit Command R, and that'll run. But if not, I can come up here to this little play sign. If you get that message, just hit stop. Essentially, what it's doing is it's okay. So one build process is started and it's starting to compile, and like you're asking it to start over essentially. So I hit this little run button right up here. Sometimes it's a little like weird, and you'll get little messages like that. Honestly, you just kind of have to keep running until it actually runs.
Is it going to take longer to run the first time?
It shouldn't. Let's see. Okay, so for those of you guys who have the computer, it's got okay. So the computers are essentially what's called frozen, and that's where no new files can be added, and OIT can easily go back to a previous version, which means OS or iOS is not installed on the simulators, and that's what the loading bar is. So go ahead and run it while it's loading in the background. We'll go ahead and go back to start explaining things. Just in the meantime, go ahead and run your application to make sure iOS is installed. So let's explain some things. So last time we talked about this is how I actually start, and here's my hierarchy. So I can click and I can start seeing things in general. I'm going to do like I did before, super simple. I'm going to go add some assets. So I think I called mine Girl1, right? I'm going to change it back to Dr. Becker just because that seems, nope, it's Guy 2. Cool, there we go. So I have my Dr. Becker again, just like we had last time. I mean, this part, pretty simple in general. The hardest part was, the button clicks, which we'll get to in a second. I'm going to go ahead and make it the size I want, arrange the label, and let's go ahead and add those buttons and, get that, what's going on, get that part, like, started already, right? So I'm going to add in my two buttons. I'm just going to have them wherever I want, and we're going to talk about like we're going to talk about more of how to do something with the button that's clicked. How can I run a function? How can and a little bit more on the Swift files in general. I don't want to run it yet, just for those of you who are working on the iOS simulator. But let's look at a few things. So one thing I mentioned in the guide is that every view controller can be attached to what's called a Swift file. So for those of you who haven't taken object-oriented yet, by the way, I'm hitting Command-Tab to open up a new tab. Pretty nice, right? I'm going to go ahead and single-click View Controller. If you double-click, it'll open up New. Sometimes that's nice. It's not always the best when you need it, but single-click, now I can swap back from my storyboard and my View Controller.
Sorry.
What's up?
Command.
Yeah, Command-T is just a new tab. I think if you go up here to File, you can say Tab. It's got to be here somewhere. New tab. Okay, yeah. So File, New Tab is another way. Or Command-T is the easiest way to go. Pretty much any editor has Command-T. So if you ever like Sublime or whatever, it's a great resource. Cool. So let's talk about the Swift file a little bit. Let me zoom in so you guys can see it a little bit more. But essentially, this Swift file is what adds the logic to my application. I have this view controller, which it may look nice, it may look ugly like mine currently right now, but I want something to happen when things are clicked. I want, for those of you who've taken Java and you have to do that like Java Swing app, this is essentially the Java code that's outside the GUI essentially. And so the biggest thing here are the packages, and you notice like if you're using Java, it's like java.swing.widget or whatever. If you're using some separate library, it's maybe math.trig, and I have access to co-side functions. If I'm in C, I can do header files, right? And that's what this import is right here. And so what UIKit is is it's Apple's way of saying here are my views or this is what a user actually sees. So inside of the UI kit, you have things like an image view, buttons, labels, everything like that. While as this one called Foundation, you don't have to write this down or anything. This actually has things like let's see, one in particular. There's like pi is attached to this one. If I want the static constant of pi, that's in there. Just a bunch of like other functions in general. There's more like foundation programming. If I want to do like bit shifting and stuff like that, that's in foundation. Another really popular one is MapKit. So MapKit actually allows it. Sometimes, by the way, Xcode gets a little buggy and it'll like fade in and out. It's just it does that. It's not the best, right? So MapKit, that offers the ability to have geolocation. I can take two distances or take two geopoints and measure the distance. And so for those of you who've never done that before, you're probably thinking, right, Pythagorean theorem, right? Well, if you take two coordinates and you do that, you're not accounting for the curvature of the Earth. So there's like the crazy huge long formula to do that. Fun fact. So back on the Swift controller, right? So we made a view controller. So that's what this is. It's a UI view controller. And there's really one main function that you need to be concerned about. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. It's not necessarily, let's not worry about it right now. But I have this view to load. And what essentially this does is it does something as soon as the application loads up. So for instance, in my case, I'm going to print something. Once again, it's just print, and I say hello, right? I can even add emojis. I'm not, like, I mean, you don't really need to know how to add emojis, but if you really want to, you type emoji, and then there it is. But anyways, hello with a little thumbs up, right? So this time I'm going to run my application, and I mean nothing will really change on the simulator itself, but at the very very bottom right down here, for those of you who can't see it, right down here, there's things happening, and this is your console. This is pretty useful when you're debugging and need to figure out like why isn't this value working or something like that. And let's see, hopefully it doesn't make me a liar and it actually does something. So let's see, yep, hello, right down here, right? Hello with a thumbs up. I accidentally made my view controller black, so let me go back and make it white again, because you can't really see that. Right up here, white, we'll run that again. And once again, I have that little hello. So you're probably thinking like, okay, so I have attached this Swift file to this view controller, right? But what if I don't want this view controller? Maybe I make something else. Maybe I like look back on my code 3 months later and I'm like, wow, this is awful. Why did I do this? And I want to restart. So this isn't 100% necessary, but I'm going to teach you how to make another Swift file. So all you're going to do is you're going to right click somewhere in this little area over here. Preferably I go in this little folder right up here, hit new file, and then you're prompted with all this stuff in general. This one will be on the next guide explaining a little bit better, but essentially you can make things like Swift files, you can go back to Objective-C, you can make new storyboards. Once again, it was just right click here and say new, but in my case, I want to make a Cocoa Touch class. And what that means is essentially it's something related to that UI view, it's something related to iOS in general. It's like when I make a new file in Java, right? For those of you who have taken like object-oriented method to swing files, it's like right-clicking and then say I want to make a new swing file, essentially. So I'm going to double-click on this. I get the Cocoa Touch class, and I'm prompted with this here. So this is the name of your class, what its subclasses, and don't worry about anything else. Like the language is obviously Swift. Don't worry about the zip file. That actually doesn't really exist anymore. So I have all these different things that I can extend. And last time we kind of talked about, or like two times ago, we talked about like everything is essentially a view controller. A table view controller is a view controller. A view controller with a map on it is still a view controller. So I have the view controller here. I'm going to keep it just as it is. And I'm going to say, what do I want to call this one? Like swipe view controller. Yeah, I'm just going to call it swipe view controller. I hit enter. I just hit create. It creates it somewhere in the project. Don't worry about it. And I have it right here to the side. So once again, there's like all this general junk. I'm going to delete all of that stuff where I'm basically prompted right back to where I was, and I have this swipe controller. So let's go ahead and add this to what we already had. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and make a new tab. Command T, make the new tab, open up the storyboard, and I want to replace the program file that this is attached to. and that is done by this little button up here. It's to show the identity of what it is. And I can see right here, this is class view controller. Remember, I already have that file called view controller. So this is essentially all of your files. It's going to find the one that hasn't been used yet and prompt it for you. So I can say swipe view controller, and now it's actually, you see up top it updated. It's now using that swipe view controller that I just created. So maybe I wanted to start, when I wanted to start over, or whatever I wanted to do, I now have access to this new, view controller. I can change things. It's just another extension, right? So next, I have this. I want to actually add code to what's happening. So we'll get to buttons in a second. But let's say we wanted to change things like a label or something like that. So this is the part that really got tricky last time, which is what I'm like extremely slow down and make sure like everyone's got it before we go on. I promise. All right. So in this case, right, I have the storyboard, and you're probably wondering what these buttons do up here. I have no idea what this button does. I'm gonna click it. Okay, I don't want to go to that button. So this other relevant button is called the assistant editor, and essentially what it is I can look at what I'm making in a UI perspective and the code that's attached to it at the same time. So the Swift files and the storyboard files. So I have this here. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to like raise your hand, interrupt me, whatever. It's not a ton of people. So I click this button here. So from here, I can see, you got the code that we just made. We just made that new controller. And I have that image to the left. I have the storyboard that I've been working on. I'm going to go ahead and, this part's not necessary, but I'm going to close out this stuff to the side so I have more area. Once again, it was these two buttons right up here. What they essentially do is they collapse the panels around you, right? So I have this view controller here, and I want to make it editable. So first things first, I'm going to go to the guide just for you guys, and I'm going to go to Intro to Xcode, and I'm going to look at this screenshot right here. So we're going to do like a little step-by-step on how you actually, whoops, what the heck? That is not what I wanted. All right, so we're going to go step-by-step on how you actually like use a label to edit it. So for those of you who are familiar with Android, you have r.id or whatever, and you can change things in general. You can inflate what's called inflating them, so you get a reference to this button, and then you can change it. So inside of Xcode, I'm going to click the button. I'm going to click the label. Just select anything you want, right? So on this side, I'm going to make a little bit more room just so I know that this area right in here is where I'm going to attach where my button is. If you've ever used some kind of like, Java before, right, you have these things called member variables. And these are the things at the very top of your class, right? Like if I wanted to find a string, whatever, it's some way that gives my entire class access. So I'm going to go through this part. Like if anybody has any questions whatsoever, let me know. But if you look down at your keyboard, there's a little control button. It's not command, but it's control, like the Windows one. If you're Mac, like we're all Mac, but it's on the far left side next to the FN button. But I'm literally going to hold that down. Once I hold this down, I'm going to click and drag. And I'll have this little weird little bar that's just going to pop out. And it's very weird. So did everybody get it to like make the little button? Everybody good? Anybody have any questions for that part? Cool. Yeah, if you need help, like just interrupt me. Like honestly, like it doesn't matter. So I'm holding control. I can put it wherever I want it. And I'm going to drag it right up here to the top. And I'm going to let go. And so I get this little side thing that asks what I want to do with it. What's up?
So earlier you said to switch the view controller to swipe
Uh-huh.
controller. How did you do that again?
Okay, so he asked how did we switch to a swipe view controller. I'm going to go back here. Whoops. I'm going to hit cancel here. I'm going to go back to the editor that we were on before, like this. Make sure that you have this side panel active, but you have this thing right here where it has the class and the module. And this is what you actually link to the program file itself. So if I go up here and I select the view controller, like where the entire thing is selected, right here, I see where I can change the class to swipe view controller, whatever I want it to be. So that's how you change that. Yeah, no problem. All right, so let's go back and let's add that label. So I'm going to click on it here. I'm going to drag it up. And now I have, this is my label. I'm just going to call it my label. Just like that, and press enter. So once again, that all I did was change the name. I'll go ahead and do something similar again just so you see. But I had this outlet selected. I just typed in my label, and then I pressed the little connect button right down there. And here you see it's right here, this little area here, and you see that it has this little plus sign, and it's actually connected to it. So this is one way to do it. This little button here lets me know that it's selected. So now that I have my label, I can do things with my label. So remember how before we did a print statement whenever the page loaded? Well, this time I actually want to make it to where the button changes when I load. So I'm going to go back and add that print statement. I'm going to say hello. But I also want to say to my label that my page has opened. So what's it called? It's called my label. So I'm going to type my label. And I'll have all these different things that pop up. And I hit dot. And I'm going to type string. Or sorry, text. There we go. And I'm going to say hello world. So let's go over that one more time. So here I have my label. I have this UI label. We already know that it's some kind of label. We know that the name of it is my label. So I can access it anywhere by saying my label. Right down here, before we had a print statement, but now I want to change the text of it. And there's a huge list of like a ton of things you can do with all these labels. But when you click on it, you hit dot text, you can set it to any string you want. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and run it one more time. I just hit run. You can see where it's compiling up there. And when it ran, it said hello world. Like we talked about last time, it doesn't have the appropriate width. We're not going to worry about that too much right now, but we have this label and it changed text. We got the essentially we got the program file to interact with the UI, which is awesome, right? So you can do things like, what's up?
Can you explain one more time how you got the label
Yes.
into the code? Sorry,
No, you're good. So let me add one more label just to show an example. All right, so here's a label right here. So I'm going to reach down to my control button. It should be the very far left on your keyboard. And I'm going to click it and drag around, essentially. So I get this little neon blue little thing. Are you getting that whenever you try it?
I can't figure out how to split the screen.
Oh, yeah. So right up at the top here, yeah, that just like that. There you go. So once you have that right there, just click the control button and drag it. I promise you, this is literally the weirdest thing about iOS. We'll never have this problem ever again. Once you figure out how to do that, it gets pretty easy. So there's another way to do it, and this is I guess if you don't like the whole control drag way, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tape the exact same thing. I'm gonna say at IB outlet, just like it did, weak var, another label. So I'm essentially doing, I'm essentially typing in exactly what it made. That's weird, it's not picking it up. Okay, here we go. So to the left here, now I have this little plus sign, but you see that one is highlighted and the other isn't. And what that kind of represents is that this one is actually connected to something. Like whenever I hover over here, I can see there it is, and this one's not. So if it ever got to the case where you deleted a label or anything like that, you have this little button here, if I can click on it, and then you just drag it to wherever you want. It's the exact same thing, except you don't have to actually hold the control thing. So I added it to this label, and that's the same thing. I have both labels essentially. So I made the text change, and now I wanna add a button. So like before, what we did is we changed the label every time the button was clicked. So just like before, I'm gonna make some room. I'm gonna do the exact same thing for dragging this label on. I'm gonna drop it in, and now we have the option of changing this. And so an explanation of what this does is you have the outlet and you have an action. By the way, this whole thing right here is in the second part of that guide. It explains a little bit more into detail. But I have my outlet, I have my action. So an outlet is like I did for the label. I was able to change the text of the label or some attribute of it. The action actually takes whatever the action is. So if I clicked on it, if I swiped on it, whatever I want to do essentially. So there's all these different types here. You can click on the type, which basically means like it's going to be a UI button or a UI label, whatever. I'm going to save the name. I'm going to say like or pressed like, something just like that. Touch up inside sender. Literally, all we're doing is changing the name and changing this action up here. and I'm going to say connect. And in this case, I have that function that just created. So let's talk about functions real quick. In our case, this is a function. This function is called as soon as the application is open. So, what if we wanted to take this and we wanted to change it? So, in my case, I'm going to type func, which stands for function. If you're going to type void, anything like that, I'm going to say change label. I'm going to add in my little brackets. And then I'm going to make brackets here. I'm going to cut and paste this up here. Change label. And there it is. So I have this exact same thing. It's just in the function. So what this essentially does is I can call it as many times as I want without having to repeat that set of code. For those of you guys who've used functions before. So what if I want to add a parameter to this? So normally I would be like int I, right? So something like that to essentially whatever it's going to be. But in my case, iOS is a little bit different, and you can see how they did it up here. I'm going to say new text, and then I'm going to put a colon, and I'm going to put string, just like that. So what this is essentially saying is I have a new parameter, and this is called string. It's of type string. It's just like saying int I, whatever I want to do essentially. And so I'll see that there's an error down here now. So I can click on this, and it'll essentially explaining that you need this new parameter. It's required, right? So I'm going to type new text. And then I just made this text just like yo, 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 right? And all I'm doing is essentially I'm passing in this parameter. And so in this case, I'm going to change this to new text, and it'll be whatever I want it to be, right? So it's taking this parameter, what it's called, it's the way you pass in the function, and it's setting it to whatever the text should be. Then once again, in view.did_load, instead of setting it like I did last time, I'm actually just calling this function with the parameter that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and run that to explain it a little bit. Let that run and do its thing, and I think it actually opened up here. So you see how it changed, and it said yo, right? So using this function, I was able to change something easily, right? I didn't have to call the code over and over. So let's put that to use. So I have this press like button. For those of you guys who watched me do it, I'll repeat it one more time. So I clicked on this button right here to the side. I held down control and I dragged it up. I went up here. I went to action. Remember, you have actions and outlets. This one's optional, but I can just change it to be a UI button. It changes to any object. I think that's a bug, to be honest. And then this time I'm going to say dislike pressed, and I'm going to press connect. And so now I have these two actions here, and there's a button clicked just like this. Once again, if you're having trouble, go ahead, interrupt me, and I'll help you out. Or if you need to slow down, I got you. I understand completely. And so I want to call this function, but I want to change the text every time I do it. So remember the function is called change label. I'm going to copy that up there, and I'll even see where it even tells me to change to new text. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say nope. And so essentially what's going to happen is when I click like and when I click nope, it's going to change two different things. And that's all going to happen on this button right here. I can make it a little bit bigger so it'll actually read this time. So once again, I have my two buttons. I change the width of this, and I'm going to run it. So now, whenever I open it up, right, it's going to change the label, and then the buttons will, change whatever it says. So here's my app. Literally, all it is, it says yo, yo, yo. I click this button, it says like. I click this button, it says nope. And the cool thing is I didn't actually have to repeat this code right here. This was, all I did literally is press like, new text, I called the function and said like or nope, and it changed it to whatever I want it to be. So, think about this for a second. Maybe I have a function, like, maybe whenever I press like, what's up?
In Xcode, does it matter where the function is? Like, could you put it at the very bottom?
No, so that's actually a good question. So unlike, C, right, so think about, okay, so who has to take C++? Like, is that in your, raise your hand if that's in your curriculum. All right, so that's actually very new. Like you didn't. I had to take Java. I didn't have to take engineering problem solving, but I had to take this class called Maths 1000. It was awful. Um, so, anyways, you in C++ or whatever, you can put the function wherever you want, but it has to be in your header, right? So that it knows it exists. But if you mess with something like C or I don't know, like Python, or I think Python does it. I'm not sure. The earlier versions of Python, it has to be in order, right? In our case, the function can be wherever it is, because I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think Swift was when it first came out, it was actually interpreted into Objective C. I'm pretty sure now it's actually compiled, like when after like version 1.3 or whatever. That's why it's so fast now. But the compiler actually picks up where your function is, so you don't have to worry about it being at the bottom, wherever you want it. So once again, we have this like and we have this dislike button. And so now we want to, I guess, change, what happens when I like or dislike. Like maybe this time I want to change the image, and this one's a little bit more complicated. Remember last time, whenever I pressed like, it went to a new page. So I'm gonna move this over a little bit. I'm actually gonna close it. So once again, I'm gonna go back to my normal editor right up here to the left. And this is gonna be the last thing I do before I take more questions and stuff. But essentially, I'm going to I'm going to change the image. So let's look at some details about the image real quick. So the biggest thing in general is the scale to fit aspect scale. So depending on how the image is, I'm just going to play around and like press a few buttons here for a second so you can see how it is. But you can see the image is changing, like it's not being stretched or whatever it's being whenever I do this. So once again, this isn't necessary, but I change it to aspect fit, which gave me the ability to, if I have this really long image, let's say somebody had a weird camera and they took it like this, right? It won't actually cut off the image. So I have this here, I have this button, but whenever I press like or dislike, essentially I want to change to the next picture. So for those of you at home, for something like this, you're probably like, wow, how do an image view? I have nothing like this. I have no idea how to do stuff like this. So when you're at home, you can Google these resources. So for instance, I'm going to say, UI image view change image Swift. So I know how to do this, but there is another way, right? So I see there's like Stack Overflow, how to change a UI image, oh cool, I have one more points. What is this? Bam. All right, cool. So anyways, this guy posted this problem, and people were helping solve it. And here it is right here. Here's the answer to all my solutions. When I press like and I move on to the next person, this is how I'm going to call or go to the next picture. So all I do is I say the image view. Remember before we set the text of a label, right? We said .text is equal to the string. This time I'm saying .image is equal to the image. Pretty basic, right? So I'm going to open Xcode, and I'm going to link this, once again, assistant editor. You'll get better at like switching, I promise. I'm going to, once again, make it another outlet. I'm going to say my image. Once again, I just press Control, drag it over here, and then my image. And I can see now I have access to it in my class. Like I can change things about it. What's up? Yes, so this particular one is an outlet. To explain, you'll see outlets and actions. So an action is whenever you swipe or click on something like a button, versus an outlet is when you want to change the attributes of it. So here we go. We have an IB outlet, and essentially we want an array of images in which we can change, right? So for me, I want to say, okay, when I click this image, I want to change and say, go to the next image. So whether it be like or dislike, I want this to happen. So I'm going to say function new image, and just like I did before, I went ahead and made it function new image. And I'm going to say my image dot image is equal to, and this one's kind of weird because I have to instantiate a new object essentially. So I'm going to say UI image, or UI image, just like that, and I'm going to open this bracket here. And inside of this bracket, I have tons and tons of different things, but the one I want is, by the way, if you're not getting this, you can press escape and it'll actually open up. It'll toggle back and forth. So I have this thing called named, and this is what I'm looking for. And remember before, I named them like guy 1, guy 2, so I'm going to change this to girl 1. So let's drag this out a little bit so you can see it a little bit more. I'm actually going to change it to next image. But here we go. I have this function called next image, and what it's doing is it's changing the image here. So I'm going to go ahead and call this once again. Whenever, remember, this one doesn't actually have any parameters, so I don't have to change anything or add anything. But all I did is I called this function in both a like and dislike. So I'm going to run that one more time, and we're gonna start seeing magic here. It's going to get a lot more fun. Because I'm going to teach you how to actually loop through a bunch of images next. And that one's a little more fancy, but that's where it starts getting interesting. Honestly, the hardest part about learning iOS is the platform in general. Like, how do I add things? How do I add views? How do I switch around? You know, once you get to the programming part and you can actually change things because you know how, it's a lot more fun. So I'm going to hit the button. Hopefully it works. Bam, it changed, right? And I keep clicking it, and it's keeping on changing. But essentially, right, I clicked this button, and it changed images. Like, right, I hit yes or no, and went on to the next person. And so in my case, let's think about this for a second. Let's say I want it to loop through a bunch of images, right? So for this to happen, I'm going to say, okay, so let's make an array, right? Let's make it an array in Swift, and I'm going to give it an array of strings. So when we think about this in a programmatic approach real quick, so we know that this is a string called girl1, and I have girl1, 2, and 3, and I have guy1 and 2. And essentially, I want to rotate through all of those until I'm done, and it says no more matches, right? Here's my like and dislike button. So there's two ways to do this. I'm going to do it kind of like the hacky way, I guess. Not too hacky, but like there's ways that you can define your variable later, like you can in Java, like when you call new, or in C when you call malloc. And there's ways where you can call them right now. So in my instance, I'm going to say let, which means it's never going to change. I'm going to say people, which is my variable name, is equal to, and I'm going to have this open little bracket just like this. Just like Python, this is just an open bracket. And you can see here I'm getting an error because it doesn't know what type it is yet. I haven't inserted a string or a number or whatever. But I'm going to say girl1, whoops. I'm going to say girl2, and then I'm going to say guy1, and then I'm going to say guy2. So I save this, and I basically have this array of different people. Girl1, girl2, that looks like a girl12, but I have a guy1 and a guy2, and I can actually access this variable wherever. So next, I'm going to say, I want a current index where I am on this list, right? So I'm going to say, okay, and here's your definition of vars and lets. Alright, so I have this thing called a var, and I have this thing called a let. I explain this a little bit more in the videos that we're about to put online, but essentially a let is a constant. Let means you can't change it. So if I go back later and I try and say people is equal to, people is equal to an empty array, right, it's going to throw an error at me because, let's see, yep, so it recommends that I change a let to var. So essentially it gives you a little bit better compile time if you use like a let, because it already knows it's not going to change, it's not dynamically allocated, right? And then var means it can change at any time. So I have a number, which means it's the position in the array, and I have the people. So how it's going to work is I'm going to say, okay, for the next image, right, I'm going to say I'm going to increment the index 1, I'm going to get whatever in that array, and I'm going to make it, right? So let's think about this real quick. So obviously the next image, I'm going to say people is equal to people plus 1. I can also say plus equal to 1. That's another way, but it's people is equal to people plus 1, so therefore it increments 1, right? Oh, whoops, my bad. Yep, you are 100% right. Bam, position is equal to position plus 1. And then I'm going to get that image. So I'm going to say, remember, it's never going to change, so I'm going to say let image is equal to, and I'm going to call my people, and just like I call the index, I'm going to say position, right? And so now I've gotten that string, and if I actually hit Alt, you'll see this little question mark, and when I click on it, it'll let me know what type it is. So there it is. It gives me a warning because I've never used it, essentially. But what I've done is I pulled that position out of this array, and then finally, I'm going to go here and I'm going to say image. Just like that. Remember, this is called the image name. I'm going to go ahead and make an image name just for just for better, purposes, right? But what happens? Okay, so our application is going to crash because we haven't done any test cases. I'm going to hit next, next, and then it's going to get to the end and it's going to crash, right? Because it's going to get array out of bounds. All right, but we'll account for that in a second. Another thing that's going to happen is when I hit next, it's going to skip the first one because I didn't actually load in 0, right? So let's see what happens. I hit next, and it goes to the next person. I hit next, bam, hit next, bam. So, oh wow, it didn't. Wow, that's pretty good on iOS. It actually, oh no, there it goes. All right, I was slightly impressed there, but that's okay. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna press back here. I'm gonna press back here, and so I have basically where I was. Uh, Basically this exact same screen. But before we leave, I want to fix two things. I want to load it on initial, like as soon as you start, and then once you're done, I want to let the user know they're done. There's no more swipes for the day, right? $9.99 extra or whatever they charge. All right, so let's go back to my view controller, just like this, and I'm going to say, okay, one way to do it is I'm going to start with -1 because I'm going to increment it. I mean, obviously this isn't the best way to approach it, but we're running out of time here. So I'm going to say next image. And so what this is going to do, it's going to go from -1 to 0, which means I'm going to call the first one from the array, right? So then I want to say, okay, inside of next image, I'm going to say if position, by the way, you don't need brackets in an if statement. If position is greater than or equal to, greater than or equal to people dot length, I think it is, size, count, yeah, there it is, people dot count, I want to return out of it. And what a return is it just breaks out, right? So to go back and define it again, right, if, whoops, I actually need to increment this up here because if it goes up 1, right, it's going to go up 1 later. So now I incremented it, and I'm saying, like, if this increment is way too far, like it's past, what's in their index, I want to break out, and I don't want to go on to the next image. And in my case, I'm going to add something before. I'm going to go back to the label that I had, another label, or I'm going to make it my label dot text is equal to no mo people, right? So essentially what's going to happen is if it's at the end, no one else is going to be there, and it's just going to say you're done and keep it on that last person. So let's run it up here, and you'll see that the girl starts instead of Dr. Becker. I hit dislike, like, dislike, and there's no more people, right? I go to the next one, and it's not crashing. So all right. So basically, a review of what we've done so far. We started this new view controller. I can like and dislike people. When I press like or dislike, it's gonna say like, hey, you dislike them, hey, you like them, something like that, right? And it's gonna rotate through an array of people that I matched with or going to match essentially. So it just keeps going, and when you're done for the day, it's done, right? So think of what we can add. Like once you have this on your own, what can you change essentially? Well, you could maybe add a thing that gets rid of the image, or maybe a new screen appears, or a warning label that's like, hey, you don't have any more left, or just get rid of the page in general, go back to another page. So I'm actually going to push this code that I have right here. Alright, so now I have it right back in the GitHub repo where we started. So if I look at this here, I can see it was updated 11 seconds ago, and I now have exactly everything I've done today. So if you have access to a Mac and you're really wanting to learn iOS by yourself, right, it'd be great to go out and try and add some of this stuff yourself, right? There's other example apps that you can go off of. Maybe you want to add more pictures or do something fancy. One person was saying, like, as soon as the launch screen happens, they want to press a button or like swipe it to go to the next page, like the lock screen or something like that. I mean, definitely play around. That's how you get better, essentially. Also, 100% make sure to check out the Mobi Awesome thing, Awesome Mobi, because it has a list of like all these different resources and how-to guides. Like I said, me and Nat today finished up the login pages, so you'll be getting emails sometime tonight about if you've already paid and can access videos and stuff. If there's some kind of problem, let us know. It's probably like a server issue. We'll fix it. But I mean, other than that, we got a semi functional app, right? It's a lot more than we've had before. So does anybody really have any questions about like what we did? Maybe explaining something a little bit more, just some random questions in general. Cool. Well, that's about it for this time. Next time we're going to actually be like when you click on their profile, it'll go to the next thing essentially. But other than that, that's about it. You guys are still free to chill out, work on the laptops here if you don't have a Mac. If you want to like add stuff on by yourself, follow some of the Ray Wonderlic guides and add stuff. But that's about it. Thanks for coming out.